I never thought the woman next door would open her door in tears and whisper, "I'm lonely." That single moment changed everything I thought I knew about love, timing, and the people we think we understand. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening. I had just finished a long day at work, dropped my bag by the couch, and let myself sink into the quiet of my apartment. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I remember feeling almost grateful for the silence. Life in your 20s can feel so scattered, and these quiet nights helped me breathe. But then, through the thin wall that separated my place from the unit next door, I heard it. At first, just a muffled sound, like someone shifting furniture. Then clearer, sharper. The soft but unmistakable sound of a woman crying. I froze. It wasn't the casual kind of crying you hear in movies. It was the kind that carried loneliness, the kind that felt heavy even when you were just overhearing it. My hand hovered over the remote, but I couldn't bring myself to turn on the TV. Something about her voice, shaky, restrained, yet breaking, cut through the quiet of my apartment and straight into my chest. I told myself to stay out of it. She was my neighbor, yes, but not my friend. We had exchanged polite nods in the hallway, the occasional smile when we bumped into each other by the mailboxes, but nothing more. She was older, maybe in her 40s, graceful in the way she carried herself, and always with this quiet confidence that made me think she didn't need anyone. And yet, here she was, alone on the other side of a thin wall, crying. I stood, pacing for a moment, debating. Would it be intrusive? Would she think I was crossing some line? The thought of knocking on her door made my pulse quicken. Not from fear, but from an odd mixture of hesitation and concern. Finally, I took a breath and walked down the short hallway to her door. My knuckles hovered above the wood for a second before I tapped lightly. For a moment there was silence. Then footsteps, slow and reluctant, until finally the door cracked open. There she was. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged just slightly, her hair loosely falling over her shoulders. And in that vulnerable moment, she didn't try to mask it with a smile. She just looked at me, as if surprised I was standing there at all. "I'm sorry," I started, my voice low. "I heard you. I just wanted to check if you're okay." For a heartbeat, she didn't answer. Her hand gripped the edge of the doorframe as if she needed it to steady herself. And then, with a softness that sounded more like confession than conversation, she whispered the words that would stay with me. "I'm lonely." The way she said it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost embarrassed, but it carried the weight of years. In that moment, the air between us felt fragile, as if I had stepped into a part of her life that no one else had been allowed to see. I nodded gently, not pushing, not asking for more than she was ready to give. "Do you want some company?" Her lips parted as though she might refuse, but instead she stepped back, opening the door just wide enough. And as I crossed that threshold, I had no idea that a single cry in the night was about to change everything. Stepping into her apartment felt strangely intimate, even though nothing had happened yet. The air inside carried a faint scent of lavender, mixed with the sharper note of wine that lingered from the half-empty glass on her coffee table. The lights were dim, just one lamp glowing near the couch, and it cast a soft amber warmth across the room. She moved quietly, almost self-conscious, brushing strands of hair away from her damp cheeks. "I didn't mean for anyone to hear me," she murmured, her voice low, as though embarrassed by her own vulnerability. I smiled, trying to keep my tone light, reassuring. "Don't worry, I wasn't spying. Just wanted to make sure you're all right." She gave the faintest nod, then asked softly, "Would you like some tea?" It felt more like a peace offering than a question, and I accepted without hesitation. In the kitchen, I heard the clink of porcelain and the gentle rush of water into a kettle. I stood awkwardly by the edge of the living room, taking in the framed photos on the shelf. 2 teenagers, maybe her children, smiling with the kind of carefree joy that only youth holds. There were also pictures of her younger self with a man whose face now felt conspicuously absent from the room. When she returned, she set a delicate cup in front of me on the coffee table. Her fingers brushed lightly against mine as she placed it down. Just a fleeting touch, but it sent a ripple through me, something I hadn't expected. "Thank you," I said, curling my hands around the cup, letting its warmth soak into my palms. She sat across from me, tucking one leg beneath her, her posture poised yet quietly tired. "It's been one of those nights," she admitted, letting out a small sigh. "Sometimes the silence feels louder than the noise." Her honesty caught me off guard. Most people wrap their pain in layers of small talk, but she handed it to me bare, as if she didn't have the energy to hide it anymore. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that. Some nights feel heavier than others." She studied me for a moment, her eyes softening, as if surprised that I didn't try to fill the silence with clichés. Then she gave a faint, almost wistful smile. "I don't usually let anyone see me like this. I'm supposed to be the strong one, the reliable one." The confession hung in the air, fragile but real. I sipped my tea, letting the warmth ground me. "Even strong people need someone to sit with them sometimes," I said gently. Her lips curved into the smallest smile, and for a fleeting second, the tension in her shoulders eased. She leaned back against the couch, letting out a breath she'd probably been holding all evening. The tea between us wasn't anything extraordinary, just chamomile in simple porcelain cups. But in that moment, it felt like more. Like a bridge quietly being built between two people who had spent too long on opposite sides of their own solitude. And as the minutes stretched, I realized that sometimes it isn't the grand gestures that change everything. Sometimes it's as simple as sharing a cup of tea on a lonely night. After finishing our tea, the apartment grew quieter. Not the uncomfortable kind of silence, but the kind that carried weight, as though both of us were afraid that words might disturb the fragile thread that had formed between us. She stood, smoothing her blouse, and said softly, "Come, let's get some air." She led me toward the balcony. When the sliding door opened, the cool midnight breeze rushed in, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and the distant hum of the city. The world outside was alive. Cars moving like fireflies down the street, muffled music drifting from a bar a few blocks away, and yet, up here, it felt like a hidden pocket of stillness. She leaned against the railing, her face turned upward toward the moonlight. Her features looked different here, softer, calmer, as if the night itself was giving her permission to let go. "This is where I come when I can't sleep," she said, her voice almost swallowed by the wind. "Out here, I don't feel as trapped." I moved beside her, my hands resting loosely on the cold iron rail. "It's beautiful," I replied, though I wasn't looking at the skyline. I was looking at her. The way the light kissed her hair, the way her shoulders rose and fell with every breath, the way loneliness still lingered in her eyes despite the calm. She must have felt my gaze because she turned, catching me off guard. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something but decided against it. Instead, she gave a faint, almost broken laugh. "Funny, isn't it? I've lived here for years, surrounded by people, and still, I've never felt more alone." Her words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to reach for her, to bridge the gap between us, but I hesitated. This wasn't about me. This was about her, about the hollow spaces she was brave enough to reveal. So instead, I asked quietly, "When was the last time someone really listened to you?" The question seemed to pierce through her, and her eyes glistened, reflecting the pale glow of the streetlights. "It's been a long time," she whispered. Her voice cracked just slightly, and before she could look away, a single tear slipped down her cheek. Without thinking, I lifted my hand. Not to wipe it away, that would have been too much, but to rest gently on the railing beside hers. Our fingers didn't touch, but they were close enough that the heat of her skin brushed against mine. A silent gesture, one that said, "I'm here. You don't have to carry this alone." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The city stretched out endlessly before us, but on that balcony, it felt like the world had narrowed to just two souls bound by an unspoken understanding. Then, in a voice steadier than before, she whispered, "Maybe tonight doesn't have to be so lonely after all." The words lingered in the air, trembling with possibility. The balcony air had grown colder, but neither of us moved to go inside. It was as though the night itself wanted us to stay, two strangers becoming something more, tethered by silence, by glances, by things unspoken. She crossed her arms, hugging herself lightly. "You're probably wondering why I said those words earlier," she began, her eyes fixed on the skyline. "Why I told you I was lonely." I shook my head. "I don't need an explanation." But she gave a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You deserve one anyway. I don't usually open up to people. I've kept everything inside for years. But when I saw you at my door, standing there, so much younger, so full of life, I couldn't stop myself. It just slipped out." Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it. She turned slightly, resting her elbows on the railing. The city lights framed her like a painting. "My husband and we've been separated for a while. He lives in another city now. We barely talk. I stayed behind, convincing myself I was fine. But the truth is, I'm not. Nights are the hardest." Hearing her admit this felt like being let into a hidden room of her soul. I swallowed hard, unsure if I had the right to respond. But my voice found its way out, low and steady. "I understand. Loneliness. It's heavier when you try to carry it alone." Her eyes met mine then, searching, vulnerable. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she reached for the railing again, and this time her hand brushed against mine. Not by accident. A soft, intentional touch. My chest tightened as warmth spread through me, though I stayed perfectly still, afraid any movement might break the fragile moment. "Do you ever feel it too?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I exhaled slowly. "More often than I admit. I keep busy, I laugh with friends. But when the lights are off and it's just me, I feel it. That silence. That emptiness." She nodded, as if my words had confirmed something she long suspected. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "That's why tonight feels different. Because for the first time in a long time, I don't feel invisible." The weight of her confession settled between us, tender and raw. I wanted to tell her what I was feeling, that her presence had shifted something in me too, that her strength and sadness stirred an ache I couldn't ignore. But the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I let my hand turn ever so slightly until my fingers rested over hers. Her breath caught. She didn't pull away. In that small, electric contact, a promise was made. Not of forever, not of certainty, but of presence. Of listening. Of not letting her carry her solitude alone, at least for this night. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steadier. "Thank you for seeing me," I whispered back. "Thank you for letting me." The city roared on in the distance, but up there, the only sound that mattered was the quiet rhythm of two hearts daring to be honest. The night had deepened, yet neither of us made a move to leave the balcony. The city below flickered with its restless rhythm. Horns, laughter, the distant bark of a dog. While up here, time slowed to something fragile, almost sacred. Her hand still rested under mine, warm and steady, and I could feel the faint tremor in her fingers, like a secret she was allowing me to hold. She finally turned her head toward me. Her eyes softened, glistening under the pale moonlight. "It feels strange," she murmured. "To be this open with someone I barely know." I gave a quiet laugh. Sometimes strangers see the parts of us that even friends overlook. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Maybe that's why this feels safe." She shifted her weight, leaning just slightly closer, as though testing the space between us. Not to collapse it yet, but to acknowledge it. The breeze lifted a loose strand of her hair across her cheek. Without thinking, I reached up, brushing it gently back behind her ear. My fingertips grazed her skin, feather-light, but the effect on me was seismic. A quiet pulse surged through my chest. She didn't move away. Instead, she closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if memorizing the touch. When her eyes opened again, there was something unspoken in them. An invitation, a vulnerability, a trust beginning to take root. Do you know how long it's been since anyone touched me like that? She asked softly. Her voice wavered, but there was no bitterness in it, just quiet honesty. I didn't answer with words. Instead, I let my hand linger near hers again. This time, she turned her palm upward, her fingers brushing against mine until they wove together naturally. The contact was simple, but it carried the weight of everything we hadn't said. Her hand was warm, her grip neither firm nor hesitant. It was the kind of hold that said, I want to believe this is okay. I want to trust this. I felt my throat tighten. You don't have to carry it all alone anymore, I whispered. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears this time, but with something softer, something closer to relief. She squeezed my hand lightly, her thumb tracing an absent-minded pattern against my skin. The gesture was tender, grounding. We stayed like that, hand in hand, as the night wrapped around us. At one point, she leaned into me. Not fully, just enough that her shoulder brushed mine. The contact was subtle, but it carried the weight of surrender. I could feel the warmth radiating through her blouse, the delicate rhythm of her breath as she allowed herself to rest, if only for a moment. The world beyond the balcony no longer mattered. What mattered was this, her leaning into me, trusting me with her silence, her fears, and her fragile hope. It was the first touch of trust, quiet but undeniable, and I knew that from here, everything between us had shifted. The night had grown still, almost too still, as though even the air was waiting for what might happen next. She hadn't moved away from me. Her shoulder remained lightly pressed against mine, our hands still interlaced. What began as comfort was now charged with something heavier, something neither of us dared to name. Her breathing deepened, steady but fragile, and I became acutely aware of every detail. The faint warmth of her skin, the lavender scent from her hair, the rhythm of her pulse where her wrist touched mine. Each sensation seemed magnified, pulling me deeper into the quiet storm building between us. She let out a sigh, the kind that carried both surrender and resistance. I shouldn't, she whispered, though she didn't finish the thought. Her voice was low, breaking slightly, as if the words themselves betrayed her heart. I turned to her, our faces now only inches apart. The glow of the streetlights caught the curve of her cheek, the line of her lips. My chest tightened with a longing I hadn't known could feel this heavy, this dangerous. Neither should I admitted, my voice rougher than I intended. For a moment, neither of us breathed. The silence trembled, thick with the tension of everything unsaid. She finally turned her head slightly, her gaze locking into mine. Her eyes, so deep, so unguarded, were asking a question she couldn't speak aloud. Her free hand lifted slowly, hesitantly, until her fingertips brushed the edge of my jaw. The touch was tentative at first, like she was testing the ground before stepping into it. But when I didn't flinch, her palm settled more fully against my face. The warmth of her skin radiated through me, unraveling every piece of restraint I had tried to hold onto. The world seemed to shrink until there was nothing left but her. The sound of her breath, the closeness of her body, the way her hand held my face as though I was something fragile and precious. My own hand rose instinctively to cover hers. Her lips parted slightly, but instead of closing the distance, she drew in a shaky breath and closed her eyes. She leaned forward, her forehead resting gently against mine. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but it was something even more dangerous. An admission that the line we were both afraid of crossing had nearly dissolved. I don't know if I can stop myself, she whispered, her words trembling against the space between us. My chest ached at the vulnerability in her voice. I tightened my hold on her hand, grounding us both. Then don't, I said quietly. She let out a soft, broken laugh, but it wasn't from amusement. It was from the unbearable weight of desire we both carried. We stayed like that, foreheads touching, breaths mingling, each second stretching endlessly. It was the breaking point, not of weakness but of honesty. The night had stripped us bare, leaving only the truth. That we wanted, that we longed, that we could no longer pretend the current pulling us together wasn't real. The night blurred into stillness, and somewhere between words and silences, we drifted into rest. I don't even remember when her head found its way onto my shoulder, or when my arm instinctively curved around her, but by the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, that's how we were. Two people who had carried loneliness for so long, finally allowed to lean on someone. I woke first, the faint gold of morning painting her face in a soft glow. She was still asleep, her cheek pressed lightly against my chest, her breath warm and even. For a while I didn't move. I just watched, memorizing the way peace looked on her. It struck me then, how fragile this was, how easily the world beyond these walls could shatter it. She stirred slowly, her lashes fluttering open. When her eyes met mine, there was a flicker of hesitation, as if she feared regret would hang in the air between us. But instead of pulling away, she stayed where she was, her voice hushed with sleep. "Good morning?" "Good morning," I echoed, my hand instinctively brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. For a few moments, we lay there in silence, listening to the muffled sounds of the city waking outside. But I could feel the weight pressing against her, the reality she was bracing herself to face. She finally sat up, pulling the blanket loosely around her shoulders. "Last night," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I don't want you to think it was a mistake." She turned to me, her eyes earnest, searching. "It wasn't. But I also know we can't pretend this is simple. I'm older. I've lived a life. I've made choices that left scars." I sat up too, leaning forward, my elbows on my knees. "I don't see scars. I see someone who's stronger than she realizes. And last night wasn't a mistake for me either. It was the first time in a long time that something felt real." Her lips trembled into a small, grateful smile. She reached for my hand, threading her fingers through mine with quiet certainty. "Then maybe we don't have to decide everything today. Maybe it's enough to know that, at least for now, neither of us is alone." The words settled into me like sunlight breaking through clouds. She wasn't asking for promises, and I wasn't offering them. What we had was something raw, unplanned, but alive. And that was enough. We shared breakfast in the kitchen. A simple meal of toast and coffee, but even that felt extraordinary, like the most ordinary act could hold the weight of something new beginning. She laughed softly at one point, saying, "It feels strange, having someone here. Get used to it?" I teased gently, and she gave me a look, half warning, half hope, that told me maybe she wanted to. As I left her apartment later that morning, the world felt brighter, heavier, and lighter all at once. The night we shared didn't erase our loneliness entirely, but it carved out a space where healing could begin. And in that quiet realization, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the start of something neither of us had expected, but both of us had needed. If this story touched you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes love can be found in unexpected places. Your support helps us bring more heartfelt stories to life. Sparkles 11.